Friends, what if The Simpsons came to Disneyland? Disney spent $70 billion on Fox. So when do we start seeing that investment showing up inside the theme parks? And more specifically, what happens to The Simpsons? Universal's rights expire in 2028. Disney's already been surveying guests, and the idea of Homer in Disneyland isn't far-fetched as it may sound. But this video isn't just about one show, it's about how Disney uses Fox IP and what could that mean for the future identity of a third gate here in Anaheim. Bricky here. Before we get started with today's discussion, make sure you subscribe to the channel. That's the best way to keep going on these adventures with me, where you know what we do on this channel. We discover Disneyland's past so we can do what we're doing today, try to predict its future. Thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate you. Let's go. As you may recall, a couple of years back, Disney was surveying guests that had been to the Disneyland Resort on how they would feel about seeing The Simpsons inside of the theme parks. And in 2028, Universal is set to lose its licensing deal with The Simpsons to appear in their theme parks. And with Disney acquiring Fox and now having the rights to The Simpsons, this feels like a pretty huge opportunity, or at least decision Disney has to make on the horizon. But this potential opportunity does set up a couple of questions. Where would The Simpsons fit in at the Disneyland Resort, and do they belong here at all? That's what we're going to break down today. So sure, The Simpsons might sound crazy, but at one point, so did Avatar, right? Like, they've pulled some wild cards out before, so maybe this isn't the craziest idea. Hear me out, put a lot of thought into this, and can convince you that it's both a good and bad idea, but more importantly, break down where in the future will content like this belong. Fox content, more adult themed content, if and when Disney decides to use some of this new IP that they've acquired. All right, first, let's break down why The Simpsons just don't belong here at all. Disneyland is historically known for a fun, friendly, family tone. It invokes optimism and is a vision of how Walt wanted to see a wholesome place where the entire family could hang out for the day. Not just the daughters, but Daddy too. And may we never lose sight of Walt's original intention for Disneyland. The park was created to be an escape from the amusement parks of the 1950s that normally were pretty seedy, had lots of trash everywhere, and the entire time you were there, you felt like you were getting conned out of whatever money you had in your pocket. That is largely why Walt Disney invented the US version of the theme park. But with the acquisition of Fox, one has to wonder, how far will Disney be willing to stretch the concept of what a theme inside of a Disney park can be? The Simpsons, on the other hand, offer lots and lots of satire, an intellectual property kids can easily identify, but the punchline is normally intended for adults. Basically, it's commentary on society. When you go to Disneyland, do you want to see commentary on society, or do you want to escape from society? Is the cynicism that makes The Simpsons so beloved something that people would want to consume there? I don't have the answer. I'm asking you. Because it's easy to see how the two worlds currently don't blend. But we don't know what the future holds. And this isn't the only Disney park in Anaheim. There are other options on the board. So if at some point DCA is to expand across Disneyland Drive, is Springfield and The Simpsons a more adult fit for a park that does tend to be a little bit more adult oriented? That was the goal from day one, with DCA being the home to different food festivals and offering lots of different types of alcohol and things that aren't necessarily what the little ones are into. Would an expansion of DCA allow some sort of room for a different type of IP, one that rounds out the park and would play a little bit more into the festival atmosphere? But DCA made open container alcohol through its resort feel pretty normal. So things that right now we can't imagine could end up becoming true down the line if Disney sees a bigger vision for where they want the theme parks and guest experience to go and grow. And DCA thrives on crossovers. You have the Fab Five here, representing Disney, Little Mermaid from the Princess category, but as well, Cars, Marvel, and soon, Avatar. DCA has a very diverse intellectual property offering, never fully overcommitting to too much of one particular type of content. It's a pretty even mix. So to some degree, it would be possible for The Simpsons to be a part of this park or a future extension of this park without overly breaking the tone. But what if Disney's plans for its newly acquired Fox IP isn't about DCA? What if it's all about a third park? Suddenly, that not only changes the entire conversation, but starts to look at a very interesting strategy. When we look at Walt Disney World, we see 4 different theme park offerings, each one with a major difference. When Disney's Animal Kingdom opened up, it created a bridge somewhere between a Disney theme park and a zoo. Disney Hollywood Studios was supposed to be, back in its MGM days, a way to get a behind-the-scenes look at filmmaking. Now, due to the internet, we know how everything is made, so a lot of that allure has been lost, but it has become sort of the movie action park at the resort, the weakest in my opinion. Epcot was the original dream that Walt Disney had for Orlando, and it is truly something unique that'll probably never be replicated to that scale. But essentially the idea was, let's make a permanent World's Fair, and I love that idea. Shout out to Walt Disney. And then with the Magic Kingdom, Roy Disney purposefully always made every decision based in his brother's vision. When the Imagineers want to introduce different IPs, different characters, different stories for Fantasyland, he said, no, I want to stick to my brother's vision. So it was the idea of, let's fix some of the problems that we had with Disneyland on the West Coast, but ultimately let's make this Walt's vision, but at a larger scale, more accessible to half of the population of the US. Because in the first decade, Disneyland was very rarely visited by anybody who lived east of the Mississippi. All 4 of these parks offer guests something different than the other. But the through line is the Disney magic. So Disney would find itself in a very interesting situation. If they do offer a third gate, it distinctly needs to have a third personality, offering fans something different to pick off the menu than what already exists. And with Disney acquiring a bucket full of new IP, but maybe that would give a third gate a different perspective, a different personality. After all, if you're trying to get people to book 3 different days, they probably want 3 different options. That offer endless diversity in location-based entertainment. The Simpsons show how adult intellectual property might give a third gate its own voice. The success of Walt Disney World can absolutely be traced down to its overall diversity. And whether it's The Simpsons or another one of the newly acquired Fox IPs, Disneyland Forward, whether it be expansions to Disneyland, DCA, or a brand new park, definitely could open that opportunity. But before we get too far down the rabbit hole, let's look at the Springfield design itself here at Universal, but also try to imagine how could Disney make a very different version if they were to bring it into their theme park ecosystem. If Walt Disney Imagineering were to design their own unique take on Springfield inside of a Disney park, I can bet you it would be different than the other location, with a higher budget, more attention to detail, and all of those famous Disney touches. Some of the things that are rendered flat would be more articulated, sculpted, and make Springfield feel more real than it ever has. However, this version of Springfield does create a strong proof of concept for The Simpsons as a successful theme park IP. Let's look at what land design lessons we can learn from this version of Springfield. Because this compact version of Springfield that fits into a very small footprint actually does a lot of work. It is loaded with tons of recognizable landmarks and characters that cut across nearly every demo of society. Tons of places that people have seen before, but finally get to visit, and also just jokes and jokes nonstop. It uses tons of layering, forced perspective, and a magical version of stacking to put everything in this compact spot, but also, importantly, to keep the outside world out of Springfield. Multi-use interiors allowed Universal to create minimal buildings with maximum guest offering. Everything on this side of Springfield is essentially one building divided up into the different restaurants. This is an old Disney trick that will need to be perfected to an even higher level with some of the tight space Disney will soon have to be designing for. This version does a fantastic job of fitting so much into a tight footprint. And if you think about it, the future of the Disneyland Resort is going to require compact lands with very, very tall sight lines. That's basically exactly what I'm standing inside of right now. And since this version of Springfield is basically a theme park hallway land that magically feels way bigger than what it is, delivering dense storytelling, just imagine what the House of Mouse could do with a bigger footprint, a larger budget, and a little bit more of that rich attention to detail. Making something feel much larger than what it is a trick that Disney has mastered. It makes me very excited to think about how this property could be blown out to a larger scale to solve Disneyland's future design problem. And really, the comparison to this piece of land and what Disney will have to do with its parking lot lands is incredibly similar storytelling and creative problem solving. It gets even sharper when you line it up with Anaheim's parking lots, where Disney is going to have to borrow from the same playbook that the original Springfield was constructed. And whether it's Simpsons or something else, this is the template for what is to come. The Toy Story lot and the space behind Disney California Adventure could become lands with Springfield-style density, where every inch is going to count in a way that it never has before. The Simpsons and Springfield offer basically a limitless amount of different stories that can be told in a very micro footprint. It wouldn't have to be physically big to already emotionally feel huge. There's not many IPs that offer this many characters, locations, and awareness from the general public. A pretty top-tier brand when you look at it that way. So when Anaheim is going to require vertical thinking, this feels like a very vertical land. Even if they just gave them a cul-de-sac with 2 attractions, a handful of shops and restaurants, it could do so much without taking away a huge portion of what's available. But don't get me wrong, the theme will matter as much as the footprint. The perfect win is where both of those ideas work together. But IP is always going to be the first part of the equation, and then the land part gets solved second. But first, you have to pick intellectual properties that are going to make people want to come visit the resort, buy that ticket, book that hotel room, and make it a priority in their family's vacation budget. But obviously, theme matters just as much as footprint, which gets back to the debate, is something like this right for the Disneyland Resort? Even though on paper, it checks so many boxes of what they'll need to use, would this be the proper IP for them to put into a park that will only have a few lands? This is all just a thought balloon, because it is not lost on me how exactly would The Simpsons play along with other Disney properties. It is a little bit out in left field, but that left fieldness got me thinking about the future and what plays does Disney have on the board, especially with a $70 billion Fox acquisition. They're gonna wanna try to squeeze every penny they can out of that 70 bill. The theme parks I don't think they'll ignore that opportunity, but it's a matter of when and where and how. And once you open that Simpsons door, what can you place next to the Simpsons? Is there a nice transition that could go from Springfield to the next idea without it feeling jarring? So yeah, as a design concept and as a rich IP, it works. But I'm not saying that it's not a risky pick. And even though Disney is all about staying timeless and classic, this is an aging IP. And I know that Disney has a new Simpsons movie on the horizon, which shows a commitment to this brand. But would Simpsons feel fresh or like an old idea pulled off the shelf? That'd be another tricky point to make this IP be that thing that gets people to book a vacation. That part I question, because it could easily end up feeling very, very retro instead of forward thinking. And as we've studied moves recently on IPs that get picked, yes, Disney does love IPs they perceive as classic, but they also love IPs that feel incredibly hip. And I don't know if the Simpsons have any hipness to them at this moment, but it is an evergreen brand, and these things do go back around. So a revival of Simpsons and the nostalgia that it brings could be something exciting for a younger audience to explore all over again, like many of us did the first time it came through. But one thing I'm pretty certain of, even if they were to use it, The Simpsons would be a filler, it wouldn't be a headliner. This isn't an IP that you center a whole park around, but it definitely is an IP that could make good use of whatever extra space you have when you're trying to bridge the gap between your anchor IPs. Simpsons could offer a good bridge between different concepts. And this isn't the only IP that Fox put into Disney's lap, because a brand like The Simpsons could round out the edges of a park that would maybe be home to IPs like Aliens or Planet of the Apes, two visually deep intellectual properties that could carry their own land. You could see how The Simpsons would sort of offshoot from those type of IPs and hold its own while creating a nice transitional land. And The Simpsons definitely test how edgy Fox content works inside of a theme park space. Universal did a good job of rounding out all the rough edges and making this feel like a family-friendly environment. Surely the concept of using some of the newly obtained IP as theme park content was on their minds when they took on the enormous debt. Springfield may bring a long-term value to the Disney Corporation in ways outside of the big and small screen, which takes us back to Anaheim's third gate potential if we stop and kind of put all the pieces together. Let me explain. So a third park that needs to feel different and have a unique identity, what would that be? And where does it come from the Disney intellectual property catalog? Ask yourself right now, out of everything that Disney owns, what's not represented in Anaheim? And hey, a very Fox-heavy park could end up feeling not like Disney at all. And that didn't work out well for DCA 1.0. So no way am I saying that this is the perfect IP, but I wanted to start the conversation of tone. And what would that perfect tone and what would that perfect tone be for whatever Disney is dreaming of next? Universal has always had to do sort of an interesting balancing act of acquiring IP that they don't own outright, which is a slippery slope, because when something becomes a massive hit, it will be painful to either let it go or pay what the owner wants to re-sign another 10-year deal. I don't know that they'll put up a fight for The Simpsons. I also don't know that Disney will let them put up a fight, because maybe they have bigger plans for this IP for their own future. But let's think again about Disneyland Forward and what are its goals? What are they really trying to accomplish with what they want to do with the Disneyland Resort over the next couple of decades? It does set a unique challenge for Disney. of just because you own it doesn't mean it's right to use in every different execution of your company. So when those surveys went out to Disney Resort guests, it opened up a bigger question. If not the Simpsons, what are you excited to see at the resort that doesn't already exist and gives Disney the flexibility to tell new stories and to create new experiences, unlike the ones they already have? And because we have seen the Simpsons materialized as a theme park land that's pretty successful with all of its constraints, it does make you wonder, could something like this be a play in Disney's future? This is one of those videos that I make where I kind of give you all the options, but ultimately I want you to make up your own mind on what you think is possible. I'm just starting the conversation. If you enjoy this type of future casting, make sure you check out this video right here where I show you 5 hidden expansion pads inside of the Disneyland Resort. And I'd love to hear your thought on what could go in any of them. Bricky here, thank you so much for showing up. I appreciate you. And I really appreciate the nice team member that gave me a little bit of extra space tonight.